And welcome. Our top focus at this hour. Chinese President Xi Jinping is in Moscow for a high-profile meeting with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. The two leaders held informal talks for nearly 4.5 hours yesterday and will resume their talks today. During the meeting, the Chinese president said that Beijing and Moscow share similar goals and further underlined China's willingness to play a role in finding a political solution to Russia's war in Ukraine. The Chinese president also hailed his country's close ties with Russia and said that China and Russia are partners in comprehensive strategic cooperation.
感谢总统先生啊，这个盛情的邀请我今天来进行这种1对1的，我们说非正式的朋友之间的这种交谈，我非常愿意啊，和你就两国关系和我们共同关心的各方面的问题深入的交换意见。
Putin further said that he had carefully studied China's proposal to end the war in Ukraine and said that he will discuss Xi Jinping's 12-point peace plan.
Уважаемый господин председатель, дорогой друг, добро пожаловать в Россию, в Москву. Рад возможности уже лично поздравить вас с переизбранием на пост главы китайского государства. Это стало возможным благодаря тому, что китайский народ и его представители по достоинству оценили вашу работу за предыдущие десятилетия.
The Chinese leader's visit comes amid concerns that China may be preparing to provide lethal weapons to Russia for its war in Ukraine, which China has denied. It also comes days after Putin was accused of war crimes, including orchestrating the forced removal of Ukrainian children to Russian territories. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the world should not be fooled by any tactical move by Russia. Blinken said that Xi's visit to Moscow shows China's intent to provide diplomatic cover for Russia's atrocities in Ukraine.
Calling for a ceasefire that does not include the removal of Russian forces from Ukrainian territory would effectively be supporting the ratification of Russian conquest. It would recognize Russia's attempts to seize a sovereign neighbor's territory by force.
Both the Chinese and the Russian leader, however, have described Xi's trip as a part of an effort to further deepen their no-limits friendship. And for more on this, we are now being joined by Edward White from South Korea. He is the China correspondent for Financial Times. Edward, thanks for joining us on WION The World is One. What message do you think the, quote, isolated Russia is sending to Western leaders, especially those allied with Ukraine, by meeting with China?
Hi, Eric. Great to be with you. I'm not a Russia expert, but for Vladimir Putin, who has been ostracized on the international stage for some time now since his invasion of Ukraine, obviously having a leader of the stature of Xi Jinping come on an official state visit, one that's going to last for several days, that is going to be beneficial to him, not just on the international stage, but also domestically, because he can show accurately that China still is supporting Russia, that the Chinese leader is still supporting him personally. And that was, of course, underscored by not just the no-limits partnership that the two sides have touted for some time, but also Xi Jinping, the Chinese president, referring to Vladimir Putin as his dear friend. So for Vladimir Putin, this is an extremely helpful visit, optics-wise at least.
Edward, critics are questioning China's peace efforts or role as a mediator. What do you predict will be the outcome of the meeting between Xi and Putin in the long run?
I suppose that it's hard to make predictions with China. One thing that Xi Jinping very rarely does as a leader is lock himself into a course of action early when he doesn't know exactly what the outcome will be. So if we take that approach from Xi, he's been very conservative, very cautious. And so he's unlikely to announce some grand peace plan, some grand bargain with Vladimir Putin. He's unlikely to apply very public pressure against Putin. He's demonstrated that over the past year. So I think the best we can hope for at this stage, in terms of if our hope is to end the war, the best that we can hope for is that he is applying some sort of pressure behind the scenes. And look, I think one thing about the critics who are questioning Xi Jinping on this visit is that everyone would like to be surprised. People would like to see China really come to the table and put forward proposals that would end the war, that would mean Russian troops leave Ukraine. But we haven't seen that from China. We haven't seen any kind of demonstration from Xi Jinping that that's the path that he's going to take.
Edward, I'm just curious, and I'm sure so many people are, why does the West look jittery or seem jittery about this meeting? The White House says they are closely watching the talks and argue that nobody should be fooled by Russia's tactical moves. Is there more than what meets the eye?
I wouldn't use the word jittery. I suppose skeptical is what I would say. And I guess just to repeat, I mean, if you go back to the February 4 meeting in Beijing last year between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping, this is where the no limits partnership was declared. This is where China sort of seemed to go all in with its economic partnership with Russia. And then since then, China was so reluctant to criticize Putin. And Xi Jinping personally wouldn't refer to this war as an invasion. And so for so long now, we've just not really seen anything meaningful in the way of diplomacy on the public stage from China. And so I suppose that's where that skepticism comes from. But like I said, people would like to be surprised, but I wouldn't expect it to come out of this visit. I think what people are more expecting is to see perhaps some more economic partnerships announced, things that both leaders can take back to their domestic audiences and say, we got something out of this. But we never know what's happening behind the scenes. It's not clear whether there is some sort of pressure being applied by China here. What we do know is that to date, China hasn't done that. China has fully supported the Russian economy, and in some ways, it's pretty clear that that's enabled Vladimir Putin's actions in Ukraine.
Finally, Edward, and this is a concern, there's a narrative that China perhaps may be discussing ways to supply Moscow with arms, yet countries like the United States are sending billions worth of military hardware to Ukraine. Do you sense some sort of doublespeak here?
Oh, doublespeak, I think, would perhaps be a stretch. I suppose look at this perhaps from the Ukraine point of view. They want the war to be over. They want Russian troops out of Ukraine as quickly as possible, today if possible. And so, Zelensky has said that he sees American support and Western support as something that is about stopping Russia from doing this again. And if you're Xi Jinping, whether or not they're supplying weapons to Russia, I think that's something that we're going to have to see from the intelligence communities over the coming weeks and months. But certainly the economic support and the political support and that diplomatic cover that Xi is providing for Putin, that is there. So the weapons, I think, is not something that we've been able to prove yet, but that would be the next step.
China correspondent for Financial Times, Edward White, thank you very much for talking to us today.
Thank you, Eric.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.